of women in community colleges. And at some point over the last 2 years, we kind of realized that we could probably offer ourselves a lot more opportunities if we became our own unique chapter. So we welcome both men and women. We exist to support you all in what you do. We want to energize, motivate, inform you on issues that are important to you, and just provide a community for people to come together and discuss the things that are important to them. So we have some upcoming events. If you're not familiar with our website, if you pull up the Valencia website, / just put ADW, and our website will come up. One of the newest things coming up, or the closest one, is our annual meeting, which will be April 21st. And I'm going to give you a shout out because we are looking for wonderful candidates to serve on our board. We'll talk about the positions that are open, what that entails, and we will have an election within the following month so that we have the new board in place by July 1st. We've had a series of unfortunate situations over the past, 6 months that our board has dwindled due to retirements and illness, unfortunately. So currently, the three of us are holding it strong. So we have positions, just know, for president, incoming president, perhaps marketing, treasurer, and secretary available to you. So, just take that under consideration and let any one of us know that if you might be interested. But you can also find more information at that next event on April 21st. We're going to be doing a tour of Second Harvest Food Bank on April 22nd. It'll be kind of a lunch and learn type of opportunity. If you were interested in that, you can go to the Edge to register for the event. Something a little new we're going to be trying here in May. We've listened to some of the feedback of our membership, and they want to be mentored. So we pulled together some ideas, and we're going to do a speed mentoring opportunity, a little bit like speed dating, but with mentors. So you'll have an opportunity to sit down with a variety of leaders across the college as we flesh out this event. This is kind of our vision, but you'll spend a few moments with each of them and be asking them questions that just help you to learn a little bit more and have them an opportunity to share with you. Any other events I'm missing?
There's a summer reading circle.
Oh, the summer reading circle, yeah, it will be coming up too. Our next book is Nudge. So we have tried to work this year, so most of our selections are available in the library and can also be downloaded. So know that will be coming up, and we're looking at June 23rd for the reading circle. ABW, we've again had some changes over the past 2 years, so as we've been reorganizing, we've just invited anybody to come and join us, and we hope you find value in our membership. As of July 1st, we will have a more defined structure and dues will begin. So on July 1st, we are going to ask for a $15 due per year, down from $25 of the previous chapter. So we're trying to offer as much value as we can at the lowest price possible. So at this time and place, though, dues are free, so please come and join us. And with that, I think that covers everything, and I'm going to introduce somebody that's been a fabulous secretary on our team and our board, Montez Bates, and she's going to share a few more items with you before we get started.
Good afternoon to everyone, and again, we welcome you to the Path to Leadership. And I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing Dr. Lisa Macon. Dr. Lisa Macon is originally from Long Island, New York. She has a bachelor's degree in computer science from the largest private college on Long Island, Hofstra University, a master's degree in computer science from America's oldest technological research institute, Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute in Troy, New York, and a master's and a PhD in mathematics from the University of Central Florida right here in Orlando. Before coming to Valencia, Dr. Macon worked as a software at several software companies. They include Exxon, Sony, Citibank, and the Associated Press. Prior to becoming the Dean of the Engineering, Computer, and Programming and Technology at the West Campus, she taught computer programming here at Valencia for 13 years. She also served as the president of the Faculty Association. Dr. Macon currently serves as the social media chair for the Association of Valencia Women, AVW, and the city captain for National Drive Electric Week. So now we will bring up Dr. Lisa Macon, and she will be interviewed by Dr. Karen Raleigh, who is the Dean of Learning Support here at Valencia West Campus.
Thank you. So this is an honor actually to be able to interview a colleague. I've worked a long time with Lisa, and she's a fabulous person. And these leaderships to pathways are an opportunity for you to learn about your colleagues that are among you and the expertise that we have. And I think I'm sure you'll find Lisa fascinating. So thank you for joining us. My pleasure. If you could just kind of start and tell us about Dr. Macon in the early years and maybe a little bit about the journey that you took to get you where you are today.
Okay, I'll try to go through the early years quickly, just highlight a couple of interesting sort of life-altering moments maybe. But I had a pretty kind of standard middle-class childhood. So for some of my students at Valencia, my childhood would have been a huge dream, but for a lot of the people that I encountered in university and along the way, I was like the poor kid. So right there, smack in the middle. Levittown, where I grew up on Long Island, some of you may have heard of it. It's actually a really famous place, and you could do a whole hour presentation on it, but it's largely recognized as the first suburb in America. And the houses that were built there were for the soldiers coming home from World War II, and they were priced to where they could afford them. This was in the late 1940s into the 1950s, and it just grew as a really interesting neighborhood, mostly families of soldiers. So my dad was one of the few kind of white-collar workers who lived in our town. Most of the people who lived there had jobs in the city, largely manual labor type of jobs. And my dad was an engineer, and he worked for a variety of engineering companies as I was growing up. And I always knew from the time I was a little kid that I wanted to do something with computers. And I'm going to really date myself here, but there's no point keeping it a secret. But I was a kid in the 70s, and computers weren't in everybody's houses. I mean, use of a computer back then was a real exciting, luxurious kind of thing. But I loved them. I loved everything about them. You couldn't keep me away from any computer anywhere that I could get my hands on. And when I was 9, my dad bought a TI 99-4A, which only the oldest of us might know what that is, but it was a little home computer. It cost like $500. Wouldn't even be worth $2 now except to a museum. Basically, they had these little cartridges, sort of like a part gaming system, and then you could write computer programs, which I would run home from 4th grade to do every single day, like the geekiest little girl you've ever met. And then to save them, you had to hook up your cassette recorder. There's another thing that the younger among you have never seen before, probably. And then it would make these hideous squealing sounds, like a mouse was being cut with a knife, and it would take, I don't know, an hour to save like a 100-line program. So this is how I started, and I loved it. Couldn't get enough of it. Every single day I would come home to do that. So it was sort of a foregone conclusion that I was going to major in computer science in college. Had some bumps in the road. One particular one, and this was a kind of a career-defining moment for me, was in 10th grade. At my school district at that time, you could take a computer class, and it was some using software programs you would never have heard of, but these were like precursors to Excel, which was VisiCalc, maybe some of you have heard of. I get some nodding in the back of the room, so I'll throw the names out for old time's sake. But and then some programming using Pascal, which is a dead and defunct programming language, but it's what I learned on principally. Pascal and BASIC, which almost no one uses those anymore. I had taken a course in a class in 9th grade with a very nice lady, Linda Pink, who I kept in contact with till she passed away about 5 years ago. And she was a huge influence in my life for good. She was a very positive influence. In 10th grade, I was put into computer class with a man named, I'm just going to use his last name just in case, but it's actually a really common name where I come from, and it was Mr. Acevedo. Levittown's largely an Irish, and even to this day, Irish-Italian neighborhood, and I was one of the few, probably handful of 4 or 5 Jewish kids in the whole town. So anyway, Mr. Acevedo had a great reputation as this wonderful teacher. Oh, he's going to teach you stuff the other teachers don't even know about. So I loved his class. It was great. We got to use all kinds of software I'd never seen before. And then that first marking period came in December of my 10th grade year, and I got a B. And this was really harrowing for me because A, it was my favorite class, and I had gotten really high grades on everything, and B, I had never gotten a B in my life, in anything. So I came home in tears. I didn't know what to do. I had said something to the teacher about it, and he said, well, you know, it's not going to hurt you to have a B, and, you know, I have good reasons for doing this, and that's your grade. So I went and said to my dad, and you have to know that the 70s, well, this was the 80s by now, were not a period of helicopter parenting. So usually you didn't go to your parents about this. Usually you wanted your parents to know as little as possible about what you were up to at school. But I was really upset, and I said to my mom and my dad, I don't know what happened, but I got to be in this class, and I can't understand why. And my dad, who probably never came to, I think the first time he went near my school was for my high school graduation. He was just always working, always busy. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She did all the kids' stuff. She went to all of the orchestra concerts and the school plays, and he never went up to school for anything. But this time he went marching into the principal's office, and the principal called in Mr. Acevedo. My dad came out of that room, and I'd never seen him so pissed off in his whole life. So he said, let's go home and I'll talk to you when we get there. And we got home, and he said, listen, he said, Mr. Acevedo doesn't think that computing is a good career for girls. So he's trying to discourage you. And 1985, teachers said stuff like that. Can you imagine that now? Could you imagine one of our professors telling a female student, I don't think this is a good career for girls, right? We would be hiring a new person the next semester. But no, this happened routinely. And so anyway, I digress. But my dad said, so he doesn't think it's a good career for girls. He's trying to discourage you, and he's happy to change your grade, and it's not about the grade, but he just doesn't want you to pursue this because he doesn't think this will be a good career for a girl. So my dad said the grade will be changed, and I have corrected Mr. Acevedo in his thinking, and I hope that you will spend the rest of the year and maybe the rest of your life showing him how wrong he was. And that's what I've done. I have so many times throughout the rest of no one has ever said anything like that to me again, and throughout my journey I've encountered so many men who have been so supportive to the point of elevating me to positions where maybe the reason that I was the choice was because I was a woman and they were trying to pioneer women in that field. So not to say that you know, haven't had tons of support from men, but lots of times when I have felt that, oh gosh, really, can I do this? This is really hard. Should I go for it? Shouldn't I? And then I think about, well, what would Mr. Acevedo say if he knew about this great thing I was doing? So that guy, I think, for some kids would have been a real negative influence, but because my dad spun it to me that way, I've been able to use it as an inspiration and to really drive me through many parts of my career. So after high school, I majored in computer science, and Montez gave you my whole resume there. Ended up, after college, after RPI, so I went right from Hofstra to Rensselaer, finished my master's there in a year and a half, and then I married a boy from my high school who was an Air Force pilot, and was stationed in New Jersey with him, had my daughter who's now 21, so it seems like yesterday in a lot of ways, but that's a long time ago. And then at that point I was working I was jumping from company to company. So the first job that I had after grad school was Exxon, which is a little ironic for those of you who know how into electric cars I am right now. The first software that I ever developed was an oil refinery system. And it was at the time, this was in the early 90s, like 1993, when companies were moving from like mainframe-based systems to DOS-based systems, which is the old command line operating system, and then finally to Windows systems. So this was a brand new Windows NT, which is a long dead and defunct version of Windows, and you'd never recognize it if you saw it today, but state of the art in 1993 doing this Windows version of the oil refinery that used to be a mainframe program, and I was paired with a mathematician. And this was like the coolest chick I had ever met. She was 26 years old. She had her PhD in mathematics. And so she wasn't a programmer. I was the programmer, right? A master's in computer science from RPI. I was pretty slick. She had her PhD from I don't remember where, but as I would be porting the code from one system to the other, she would be verifying the calculations just to make sure I wasn't screwing up the math along the way. And I thought she was the coolest person I'd ever met, and she was so good with not just calculations, but just understanding the theory behind the math we were doing. And that encounter almost exclusively is the reason that years later I decided to get degrees in mathematics. So I did well at Exxon. So when you're a female, especially back in that day, but I actually think given the female enrollment we have in these programs like computer science now, that the same would actually be true today. When you're a female who works well on teams, who's good at talking to a room full of people, compared to the guys who were very poor at it, the guys on my team were very poor at it, you start getting snatched away by other departments and other companies. So I just made some quick jumps to Sony and was part of the team that did all of the programming for the Sony Wonder Museum, which is in Manhattan, and if you've ever been there and visited, it's just a cool multimedia museum with little robots and other kiosks that you can do, and that was my team that did that. They've probably upgraded it several times since then. And then to Citibank, where I worked on a team where we created the training system for the tellers. And then I had my daughter, took a couple months off, and then was recruited by the Associated Press. And that was the coolest job ever. So you know what the Associated Press is, right? Newswire service. So by that point, I had been promoted to project manager. So I wasn't doing most of the coding at this point. I was helping people code. I was directing the project. But I was a 25-year-old project director for the Associated Press in technical research and development, which was so cool. But I had to travel a lot, which is awesome for a 25-year-old. I got to go to Amsterdam, I got to go to Italy, Milan, Rome, London multiple times, Germany, Frankfurt. The people there at the Hop on Hop pretty much knew me by my first name. And so it was awesome, and all on the AP's dime, and they always flew you business class, and it was just really great career. But I missed my daughter's first steps. My husband at the time was deployed. She was staying with my parents, so they got it all on, VHS or whatever, tape, and I got to see it, but I wasn't there when it happened. And that really got to me. That was like days of crying myself to sleep. And so that was really tough. Well, right around that time, my dad got transferred to Florida. His office was moved to Longwood, and my marriage at that time was kind of falling apart. So my husband and I decided to split, but both moved to Florida. He didn't re-sign his commission with the Air Force, and he, along the way, had gotten trained in computer network administration. So he got a job at that time in Merritt Island. My parents were in Orlando, so we were real close. It was pretty amicable separation, and he could be nearby, but we weren't together anymore. So my daughter and I moved in with my parents, and my parents came to me, and again, this was principally my dad in this kind of forceful role, and he said, you don't have to pay rent, and you need very little money for your car insurance, and Rob, who's my ex, would help out with that. He said, you've always wanted to get your PhD. UCF is 6 miles up the road from our house. Why don't you go do it now? We'll help out with Tracy, who's my daughter, and you can get that done. So I know I was really fortunate to have that opportunity. I always think of my students when I see them struggling with all the things they have to juggle in their lives, families, full-time jobs, and whenever they need an extra day or extra couple days, or they want to meet outside of the time I'm usually on campus, I try to think of the fact that I got really lucky because I had a family that was able to pick up all of that slack and offer me all that support, and it was still really hard to finish school, even with all that support. So I try to be really cognizant of that at all times, and try to help the students and in the whatever small way I can to be their family and their support when I can see they're really dedicated and they're trying to get it done, and it's just 24 hours a day just isn't enough to come back to that moment and think how lucky I was, and now I need to give it back. But anyway, almost done, Karen. I'm sorry. No, we'll be here all night. So I got my master's in math. That was really just on the way to the PhD. And then I was working on my PhD full-time at UCF, and I got a call from Julie Phelps, who some of you may know teaches math here. Well, she had been a classmate of mine at UCF, and she had gotten a tenure-track position teaching math at Winter Park at that time. And she said, we've got this Friday night algebra class, and nobody wants to teach it. And she knew that my ex had my daughter every Friday night, and I had her every Saturday night. So she said, would you be interested? We pay you. So all I had was my graduate assistant salary at UCF, which at the time was really pitiful, even worse than it is now, if you can imagine. And so I took the job, and so if you can imagine the desperation of people taking college algebra from 6 to 8:45 on a Friday, just wrap your head around that. These were some awfully broken people, okay? Some of them had tried college a dozen times. Some of them had tried that course a dozen times. Talk about people with life and work commitments. This was all the time they had to do college algebra. And I fell in love with these kids. And they were all kids to me. Some of them were 20 years older than I was. But I loved it. It was like, I had been teaching at UCF, teaching trig and algebra and pre-calc and other courses there. And that was great. I really enjoyed it. But those kids had to come from here to here to do what they needed to get done, and most of them were able to do that with no problem. But these folks, they had to come from here to here, and they were giving it everything they could. And for some of them, I felt like this was their last shot. Like if this didn't work, they were going to drop out and never go to school. So they all passed. They all genuinely learned mathematics. Sometimes I got there at 4 in the afternoon. Sometimes I met them on different days of the week. But I was just determined that they were all going to succeed. And then I guess I did a good job because they asked me to come back and teach 3 classes the next semester and then 4 classes over the summer. And while I was in the mailroom at Winter Park that summer, I was reading the bulletin. Do you guys remember the bulletin we used to get? We used to get a paper newsletter every week. It was really cool, actually. Definitely the Grove is more 21st century, but this was back in, it was 99, I think, or 2000. And they would list all the open positions there. And that was pretty much, as an internal employee, the only way you would know. The website was in its infancy. You would just know from newspaper ads or whatever. So I saw that there was a tenure-track position for computer programming open at the West Campus. I'd never actually been to the West Campus, and I hadn't taught a computer programming course in many years. But I applied, I showed up, I taught the people in the room something on the board real quick that I had taught that morning in my college math class, which was very much computer science-y related. And a week later, I had an offer that I was starting here in August. And the rest is kind of history, so. There you go.
So that's quite a journey and a very impressive one. Now, you kind of dabbled almost in some things along the way, but I think knowing you now, you've kind of hit on your passion, which is leadership. So tell us a little bit about your leadership journey, maybe starting with that first leadership lesson and how you came into leadership.
Okay, well, I think I had a lot of leadership observations, and most of them were here. I could say I never really considered leadership in the sense of becoming a dean. That wasn't my goal when I started to teach. To be honest, when I was at UCF, I thought I was going to be a university professor doing research for the rest of my life. That was my plan, which Valencia completely derailed after I met the student. After you have that, it's a euphoric moment of seeing your students who never thought they could make it. That's just, those of us who work here and see that, we get that. And you can't explain it to somebody. They can only experience that in the classroom or in the advising office or wherever it happens. I know the magic happens in a lot of places. But when I was at the Associated Press, I had my manager there, and he was fantastic guy. His name was Fadi Karola, and he was from Iran, and I hadn't really met anybody from Iran before that, but he had lived in the U.S. a very long time. And he had a family and a bunch of kids, and he was really excited about getting more women on the team, and they were very hard. It was very hard to find women who had leadership skills, technical skills, and that sort of thing. But watching him and observing him as my leader was really inspirational to me. A lot of the things I feel that I do as a leader, a lot of my style comes from him. He was the first leader I'd ever known as a manager. At my other jobs at Exxon, Sony, Citibank, I had experienced some real hands-on leaders. Like, they wanted you in the office coding all day, every day. They would check on you in the morning to make sure you were there at 9 and check on you to make sure you weren't taking long breaks and things like that. Which, I guess in that day and age, that's what managers always did, in the 80s, 90s. Most jobs were clock hour type jobs. Even if you were doing a project that may take a variable amount of time, your butt in your chair was what mattered to your boss. But Fatty wasn't like that. He was the first supervisor I ever had who, when I would come to him and say, well, my daughter, I just got a call from daycare, she's got a fever, they want me to pick her up, so I need to put in sick time yet again. And this was a regular thing, when your husband's deployed and you're the only, like a single parent at that point, really. So it was always me having to manage those situations. He would say, listen, if you can get this a couple of hours of coding done at home or a couple of hours of reporting or whatnot, then there's no need to do sick time. I had never heard of this before. I mean, nowadays, that's routine. We do the work, we get it done, and we're not really counting in a lot of the jobs here at the college, and I know it's not true of all jobs, but we're not counting the number of hours your butt's in that office chair. So that was really illuminating to me, and to be honest, it made me want to work so much harder. I have never worked as hard up to that point as I did for that guy, because I knew that he was trusting me. I knew that he believed that I had the ability to do these things no matter where I was and how much I was multitasking, and that was just really, really critical to me, and I've thought of that many times. Now, all of that being said, people have to do their jobs when you give them that kind of flexibility, and so I've had to learn along the way, because I've made this mistake a few times, to check and just make sure that that's happening, that extending the trust is always a good idea, but you have to make sure that the trust is coming back the other direction, and that folks that report or that you lead are actually doing the work that they're supposed to do when they're not at work. Mm-hmm. So
I don't know if you still keep in contact with him, but when you need support, when you need to reach out, when you need that mentor, where do you go for that support?
Actually, usually it's somebody here, and I've had so many mentors here at the college, and I do keep in touch with Fatty, but but it's just sort of rare just to see what's going on, how he's doing. One of the people who's the mentor I look to the most, but there are so many, and it really just depends on the situation. But I've been here a long time now. It's going on 16 years, full time, and then there was a couple of years the year or so part time before that. But one of the first people I met at the college was Susan Kelly, and I don't know if any of you remember her, but she was our vice president for institutional advancement, which is a position we no longer have. When she retired about 6 years ago, that position was split up, and the work was delegated to different vice presidents' areas. But I met her at academic assembly, that very first academic assembly, so like my first day of work. I'm so excited. And back then, now we do academic assembly at the East Campus, we do it in the Performing Arts Center, and we all sit there in the theater and everybody comes up on stage. But back then, it was over in the gym, which is now the HSB, and it's half the size it used to be. It was a huge gymnasium, and they would serve us a plated breakfast, and everybody would get up on risers there and do the same kind of presentations. It was really cool. Things that I miss about the early 2000s. But anyway, so I was sitting there at the table with my husband, Brian, who I met at UCF, and many of you know he teaches math at the Winter Park campus, at the Lake Nona campus, but he was at West Campus for 10 years before that. As Teresa knows, she used to work with him daily. So we were sitting there, and we didn't know a whole lot of people. We're just kind of sitting there, and so this very nice lady comes and starts talking. Hi, I'm Susan. I work at the downtown center. I mean, I had no idea who she was. I had no idea who would be at academic assembly. And she was just asking us all kinds of questions about ourselves, and come to find out later that day that she's a vice president of the college. And that was just mind-blowing to me, that in her whole conversation with us, she wanted to know what we were doing. She was really interested in what we were interested in accomplishing with students, and not once did she say, I'm the vice president of blah, 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 blah. So that was kind of like a seminal moment. And she and I have maintained a friendship way past her retirement, and try to have lunch with her at least once a semester. And I always try to treat her. Sometimes she lets me. But she's one of the people I would definitely call, and have called many times when I'm just having one of those, oh, this crazy stuff is going on. Not only does she have the Valencia perspective, but she was such an amazing and well-respected leader for so long. But also, the other person I call pretty much every day, and I'm sure he sees my number come up and he just goes, oh, her again, is my former dean, Nasser Hidayat, who is now the AVP for Career and Workforce Education. And he also has been a huge support to me as a mentor. I'm not saying that he, I've sort of followed in his footsteps, basically, him being the dean before me. And he would give all of us in the department a lot of opportunity to learn from his leadership and to have leadership opportunities ourselves. So there would be times he would say, can you go to this meeting for me, or can you run the division meeting? I have to be in 2 places at once. And some of the program chairs sometimes are like, oh, I have too much work to do, I don't want to do that stuff. But I always saw that as an opportunity to learn and to grow. So he was always really great at doing that. And I not just didn't just learn from those opportunities, but learned from watching him give those opportunities, that people aren't going to stretch and grow if you don't give them an opportunity to get out on a limb and do something new and a little bit scary. So those are the 2 people I think of most as mentors.
Great. So our experiences make us uniquely ourselves. So you have these wonderful mentors, these wonderful experiences. Describe to us how that has translated into leadership. What's your leadership style? What is your approach to leadership?
Yeah, well, I think my leadership style is the same as my parenting style, which is empowering rather than that nurturing style. I'm not sure if my team members would say that, though. I think in a lot of cases they feel like they're nurtured, and I think that's just in comparison with the 3 male deans that we had before me, that I think sometimes that because I'm a woman and a mom, that I come across as more nurturing. But I know that compared to, like, within my own family unit, my husband's the nurturer. So our kids will fall down and scrape their knee, and he'll be, oh, let me get you a Band-Aid, are you okay? Here, let me give you a hug. And I'm more like the, come on, walk it off. Someday you're really gonna hurt yourself. You want me crying over all this little stuff? And I think I get that from my mom because she was a nurse in the ER. So unless the bone was sticking out of the skin or the fever was above 105, we were going to school. But I feel like here at work I do the same kind of thing, in the sense that this is also, I guess, just being not a micromanager is what I really mean by empowering. And it's sometimes a good thing, sometimes not. I like to give people things to do and then let them figure out how they're going to do it. So I don't necessarily want to know what your step A, B, C, D, E, and F are going to be. Just let me know I've got a plan, it'll get done on time, and then if you need any help, here I am. So that's typically the way things work. And that works really well with the people who are self-motivated and who want that kind of freedom to learn something and to try something without having to get 50 different boxes checked by their supervisor. So I would say that's the style. And I've had to learn over the years to at least out front set up some kind of process by where, well, once a week, let's just get a little status report and make sure you're doing that. Because my first semester as a dean, when I gave somebody a project to do, we got to the end of the semester and I said, well, where's the results? And she said, oh gosh, I never did it. And then I was left on kind of hanging out on that limb and had to answer to my supervisor for why that work hadn't gotten done. So it's kind of a fine line. You have to balance giving people that leeway do things their way and try what they, and not have them do it exactly the way I would have done it, but then to just make sure that they're progressing towards that goal and that the work gets done.
So family and life greatly influenced your leadership style. Now here at Valencia, obviously we have a very unique culture. How has the culture of Valencia influenced your leadership style?
Well, it's completely defined my leadership style. I mean, a lot of the leaders that I've had a chance to work with here, these empowerment kinds of techniques, a lot of that comes from the leaders that I've served with as well. The culture at Valencia also, the learning-centered culture of Valencia makes a big difference to me, and I know to my team as well. We do a lot of things here. I learned from many of the folks that I worked with coming up through the years as a faculty member and as a faculty leader to try to define principles before we tackle something and try to accomplish it. So, for example, I had the good fortune to serve on a committee with the former dean of math, Lisa Armour, and love her or hate her, she was really good at running a project from start to finish. So one such project she did that I was able to be part of was redefining faculty engagement hours. They used to be called office hours. They were 10 hours in your office. You sat there whether you had students or not. And at some point through the years when internet technology became really good and a lot of people were doing online classes, there were faculty and administrators saying, well, why do we have people sitting in their offices during the 9 to 5 hours when that's really not when students necessarily need to engage faculty? So she led a task force to make some changes, and rather than just sitting down and saying, well, what do we want to do? What do you think we should do? She said, well, let's come up with some principles first for what's important, so that when we get to the how can we make these changes, we can always ask ourselves, are we sticking to our principles? That was really huge for me. I had never seen anybody do anything like that in my whole life. But if you look at some of the really successful companies out there, like Google, for example, or Apple, they have design principles for every project that they do. That's not really something that I learned through any of my faculty development or training here. That had to be learned from somebody who was really adept at using that kind of technique. So we apply that in our division all the time now. Like even for scheduling courses, it's really easy with, and I don't want to pick on faculty, but I don't think there are any of them here, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Just, okay, so there you go. There's a couple here. Okay, well, I won't pick on you guys, but pick on my faculty a little because none of them are here. No, but any group that has the freedom to do things like schedule something or pick when they're going to work. It doesn't even matter. Faculty, anybody who gets to choose their work hours is of course going to choose the stuff that works best for them, right? Like, sure, we all want to work the times of the day where it doesn't interfere with any of our rest of our lives, the times of the day that fit really nicely with our biorhythm, right? I mean, for me, that would be like 1 to 10. It would be awesome if I could just sleep until 10. But everybody's a little bit different there. See, yeah, right? Although, unfortunately, that's never been my work schedule, ever. But that's okay. So what we decided to, so if you allow those things to just progress along what is comfortable for the group that is giving the service, and in this case it would be faculty, but you really could make the case for any group, then you start to see interesting patterns happen, and then the consumers, in this case the students, will start coming to you and saying, well, I work during the day, I need to take classes at night, there are no night classes, or vice versa. I mean, it goes both ways depending on the people. So I was seeing a lot of that happening over a short amount of time when I became the dean. And so we sat down with a group of people who were interested in serving the students best and worked on principles for scheduling and staffing courses. And then we were able to say, well, the classes need to be when students need them. We need to offer the classes that students need to complete their degree, and so on and so forth. And we were able to define a list of 7 principles, kind of in priority order. Now, scheduling is really easy, and people don't even argue about it anymore because we always have those principles in front of us, and they can say to themselves, well, I'd rather work at this time, but that would violate principle number 3, so I'm okay with this. We agreed on these principles as a group, and we eventually did, as a full division, all sit down, go over the principles, made some minor changes, but everyone was able to agree, if not on the little details of how we were going to schedule, on the principles of how we wanted to serve the students, and then that really changed the way that we did business. So, and that's all Valencia culture. I don't know why we've got that anywhere else. So.
Yes, a very collaborative nature, and you were able to use that collaboration to impact the way you went about your work. But I know you're involved in so many projects, and I just wondered if you maybe share a couple of the opportunities you've had to influence change at Valencia, transformational type of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's sort of these microcosmic efforts and then these huge ones. Let's see, maybe one from the past and then one that's going on right now. So the one that's going on right now, if you haven't heard about it, you're going to soon, but we're going to be making some major changes in the way we do online education here at Valencia. There have been a couple of announcements in certain email went out from Dr. Ledlow regarding that. That's been something that's been a passion of mine forever. My first semester here at Valencia, I was given an online class to teach. I'd never taught one before. At UCF, certainly not, and I'd never taken one even as a student, so I didn't know what that even meant, and I felt like I got thrown into a 40-foot diving tank, and I had to either sink or swim, and I'd like to think I swam pretty well because I've taught online classes every semester I've been here since the year 2000, so I've definitely seen the evolution of online education from the old version of WebCT where our courses were hosted on WebCT's servers to having our own servers to switching to Blackboard and so on and so forth. So I know that I would never want a faculty member to have to sink or swim the way I had to. Not everybody will swim, and that's really unfair of us to have that expectation on people. So I'm really excited to be part of the work that's going to be putting a consistent and effective training program in place for faculty that all faculty are going to be required to do before they can teach online. So we've had offerings for people, but now they're going to have to do it. So that's been a really huge change, and that wasn't just me, obviously. That's been a whole core team of people, from faculty development to academic affairs to OIT. I mean, everybody has wanted this to happen, but it's a really big, it's like steering the Titanic, and it's taken a lot to get to this point. Trying to think of in the past, I know one thing I've been working on for several years is this Women in STEM initiative. It's really painful to me that my first semester here in 2000, I taught a class where I was the only woman in the room. And the last time I taught a class face-to-face in 2011, I taught a class where I was the only woman in the room. So this has been really, really difficult. And even though, there's a lot of work that's been done, a lot of research that's been done outside the college in terms of how to tackle this, and there's some institutions that have been really successful when they really put a lot of resources into it. But all of the research pretty much tells us that if we wait to recruit females into STEM programs when they are coming into college, then it's way too late at that point. So we've shifted our efforts now, and we're doing a lot of outreach into the 5th grade, where the research shows that that's the critical time. If you don't have the girls by the time they're in middle school, then you've lost them forever. So you may have read about it in the Grove. We hosted our first Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day, which was in February, and we had 40 5th grade girls from all over Orange County, and it was hugely successful. We actually had a waiting list, and I've got angry parents calling me every other day asking when we're doing the next one. So that's one thing that I hope that my position as a computer science faculty member, but also as the dean over many of the STEM programs, not all, but definitely all of the career-oriented STEM programs, the AS STEM programs, that we'll be able to see some effects. It'll take a while till those girls get here, and a lot of them may not come here, but hopefully if we start building a culture of STEM being cool and nifty in our public schools, that we can get more girls interested.
Very good. So I want to leave a little time for question and answer, so just one kind of
Okay.
large question left for you.
Okay.
But as a leader, have you left people and places better than you found them? And then kind of two-parter here. How would you encourage leaders or other leaders to do the same?
Okay. Well, I'd like to think I've done that. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask them, I guess, whether that's the case. I know definitely some people. I know that the folks who have felt micromanaged for a long time, that there are quite a few folks that I work with in a lot of different capacities, not just in my division, who I would technically supervise, although I actually hate that word. I prefer lead. But who have had the opportunity to do things that they make their own decisions and facilitate projects that before they would have just been given step-by-step instructions and just would have felt that it was work they had to get done, whereas now it's a project that they're leading and something that they can say they truly made happen. And so some of the folks who were colleagues of mine before in any area, who I thought were just people who wanted to come to work, teach their classes, or sit at their desk from 9 to 5 and go home. I think now I've seen these folks do a lot of work outside of work. So emailing, late at night because they're working on something, or wanting to come in on the weekend and help out with an outreach project. So to me, as long as they're doing this because they really, really want to, and I would hope that anybody who's going above and beyond is doing that because they're feeling inspired to do that, I think that leaves them better. I think that if you have an appreciation for what you're doing, pride in what you're accomplishing at work, that's definitely leaving someone better than someone who's just doing a job and getting a paycheck. So I hope so.
Great. Anything that you'd like to add about encouraging other leaders and aspiring leaders to do the same?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to me, what I like to folks who are interested in leadership and ask me what I think about that. A couple of little points of advice, really just two, would be don't wait for the leadership opportunity to come to you. You go to the leadership opportunity. So I don't know a single successful leader, or even that many people who have leadership positions at Valencia or anywhere really, who didn't do things above and beyond their expectations at work, and who only did things for which they expected to be paid. So I know that many of the folks that I've learned from, and myself, and a lot of the folks that I work with on a day-to-day basis now, would be the first people to raise their hand and say, I'll take control of that, or I'll make sure that gets done, or I can help out with that. And even when they're completely stacked with things to do, these are the people who end up to be leaders, not the people who are just kind of serving time and waiting for that opportunity to arrive and then just say, well, I've been here the longest. But here at Valencia, that doesn't get anybody a leadership position. We have seen people rise very quickly through leadership who were here a very short period of time, and I can tell you with complete assurance that never happens because they're anybody's favorite around here. There's too much to be done and too little dollars to do it with. So the people who make it clear that they want to do it for the sake of doing great work are going to rise through leadership, and then other people are going to sit in the same position for their 25 years or 30 years, and everybody here at Valencia is okay with that. So that's number one. The second thing is to find an inspiration, or multiple inspirations. Like I have my negative inspiration of Mr. Acevedo. I also have a positive inspiration, and I'll leave you with this one. Sometimes when I think I have rough things happening, I'm able to channel my feelings about showing Mr. Acevedo how wrong he was every single day. But then other times in other parts of my life, I channel somebody else, and that's my grandma, my maternal grandmother, Ilsa, who I never actually met because she died before I was born, but I was named after her through the permutation of an L and an I. And she was, she's an inspiration to everyone in my family, but I channel her on a regular basis. She was born in Germany and was pregnant with my mom in 1939. And she was a professor of mathematics, actually, at that time at a university, but being Jewish, she lost her job. Her husband was not Jewish, and it caused a lot of estrangement between the two of them, given what was going on in Germany at that time. And she actually left her husband while pregnant, took her elderly mom and her younger sister, and got all of them here to the United States. And actually, along the way, The ship that she was able to get them on was destined for Panama, so that's actually where they all had to get off, and that's where my mom was born, actually. My mom was a German Panamanian citizen until she was 17 and was able to be naturalized. And then she met and married an American soldier, and I don't know if any of us will ever be sure whether that was out of love or out of need to get her family into the United States. I've never met her to ask. But they were married for the rest of her life, so they certainly found love along the way. And I mean, this is a woman who just did what had to be done in what I'm sure were some very, very dark moments. I mean, I can't imagine. When I was 8 months pregnant, I can hardly imagine getting out of bed, let alone being on a oceanic voyage with an elderly person to take care of. And I just don't know how she could have done that. And I think she was amazing, and I can only hope that I will end up to be half as much of a powerhouse as she must have been. So the story in that, besides it being a cool story, and I think would be a great movie, actually. The story behind that is, life is tough. I mean, there's always going to be tough moments. No matter how much support you have, there's always going to be that night you're tired, but you have to get the take-home test done, or the day where you just have back-to-back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and I've had that day many times, where you just say, screw all this, I can't do it anymore. But if you have somebody that you can kind of channel and say, well, you know what, if she could do it, if he could do it, then of course I can do it too.
Well, I thank you, Dr. Macon.
Thank
It was
you,
a lovely
Dr.
story.
Riley.
Thank her for her story.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Montez to come back up, because I'm certain you may have questions among yourselves, and Montez can lead here. I'll even give you my seat. How's that?
Okay. Thank you.
Then we'll have, maybe 10 minutes or so.
Just a couple of things that, I don't know if you all know me, but lots of times when I'm in meetings, I'm writing constantly. So I wrote down a few things that I just kind of want to highlight and that may help you to come up with some questions. The first thing Dr. Macon talked about was a female works well in teams, and she certainly is one because I work on a team with her. So if you keep that thought in mind, and also people stretch and grow when you give them an opportunity. Design principles for every project, such as how we want to serve our students. And then I think this is very important for what we're going through now with STEM. The Women in STEM initiative that she's so proud of and works so well with. What she did a couple of weeks ago with the 5th grade students, which, I don't know if you all saw it. Has it been in the Grove? Mm-hmm. It got a lot of attention, and I think that was a very worthwhile project. And then her leadership advice. Don't wait for leadership opportunities to come to you. You go to it. And you may have to do something and not necessarily look for the paycheck in it. And find an inspiration, be it negative or positive. Do what has to be done. Life is tough. There will be tough times, but channel someone to make it better. So those were all some things that I wrote down as the two of you all were talking. So does anybody have any questions? This would be an opportunity. Anything you might want to ask?
Well, I'm really interested in what you saw when you worked with the 5th graders, because you've obviously gotten to your point of leadership and through your education in science, technology, engineering, math, because of your passion. And you talked about your passion when you were a 4th grader coming home from school every day. Did you see that same passion with these 5th graders, or we would talk about the helicopter parents? Was it the helicopter parents who were forcing them? Because it makes a difference.
Right.
You're here because of your passion. You want to. If you see that same passion in those young girls, they're going to strive to be the leaders too. But if it's their parents that are forcing them, are they going to be the same leaders?
That's a great question. And, of course, my naivety when we planned the day was that, well, gosh, every kid's going to want to, every girl in Orange County is going to want to come to this.
Yeah.
My gosh, I wish they had something like this when I was a kid. I would have been there every time they offered it. I've been knocking the other kids out of the way. No. But I think there was some kids there that very much that was the case. I have a fifth grader. I have 3 kids, and my middle child, Sheridan, is 11, and she was dying to go. So I was actually there also as a parent too. But some of the girls, one of them at our table wanted to be a cartoonist, and her mom had pretty much dragged her there to say, well, you're being a cartoonist, you won't be able to pay the rent, but here's something you can do. So there were definitely kids that had got dragged there. I hope that through the activities that happened that day, which were largely orchestrated by Deb Hall, who is like the most amazing engineer ever, and if she doesn't get girls excited about the possibility of engineering, I just don't think they're going to get excited. But also, the Society of Women Engineers students that we have, our student chapter members, they really ran the show. So hopefully the girls got to see that you could be girly if you want, if that's what, if that's your natural inclination, and still be doing really cool things with technology and math, which is really what we focused on that day. So yeah, I think there was some element of the helicopter parent there, and I don't really have a good statistic as to whether it was half of them or whatnot. I know some girls were real excited to be there, but hopefully we were able to connect them to that, and also to connecting. I know for me, I love technology just for the sake of technology, but the research that we've been doing, or the research we've been reading, shows that a lot of girls the younger girls connect with careers that will help people, help society, make the world a better place. That was never what particularly spoke to me, but hopefully we'll see that. We were able to really focus on that in the workshop and connect to how smart buildings and clean buildings will will save money and save the environment and things like that. And it was really interesting to me. One of the activities the girls did was they had to come up with they called it a helmet, but it was really some sort of contraption that they could encase an unboiled egg in and then drop it from 5 feet in the air. So the girls got the egg, and they had markers on the table, so they start drawing faces on the egg, and they're naming the egg, and here's Egbert, and oh, do I have to drop him, Dr. Macon, because what if he breaks and then he'll be dead? And I said, well, you better design a really safe helmet then, because you have to drop Egbert. And so when Egbert died, there were tears, and I know that my 9-year-old son would have been like, Mom, can I drop him from the 3rd floor and see how far it can splatter? So, as much as, girls and boys, they can all do these fields, as a generalization, lots of times they're motivated by different things. So that was the first time I'd read that we could motivate the girls by personalizing it, making it about the people, helping. But that was the first time I actually saw that in person, that difference, and how we could really focus on that. Hopefully we can make a difference. We'll see. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Any other questions? Yes, Judy.
So I know that you said that this program is reaching out towards the people to plant the seed so that years later that they might enter into the field. What experience or involvement do you have at the college? Because I don't know what what is made up of our computer teachers
Mhm.
here. Is it mostly male also?
Right.
And what kind of recruiting or what are we doing to be attractive, to get the unicorns? Because you're the unicorn out there. You're like, oh, the female engineer, computer. Are we doing anything to solicit people to come be here? Because I know that other places are going to snatch the unicorns up.
Right. Well, as far as faculty go, if that's what your faculty and staff go, we do have at least one female faculty member in every program in my division, which I think is awesome. And that is, it's partly by design. I mean, we're always cognizant of the fact that if girls, and by girls I mean the 18 to 20 girls, don't see someone who looks like them in the classroom at least once in a while, that then they don't feel they belong there. And that goes for many groups, not just the girls. But honestly, when you look at our STEM programs at Valencia, especially engineering and the tech programs, we have great diversity across race, ethnicity. It's beautiful, actually. the one diversity we don't have is the females. We have, the highest one we have is information technology. It's at about 25%. That's super high compared to like electronics where it's 9%. That's very sad. So where we have put out some promotional, so we're doing a lot of stuff, promotional materials where they're looking at a woman in a hard hat, connecting wires, up on a telephone pole or whatnot. So we have made a lot of changes in that area so that if a woman would be interested in that sort of thing, she's at least seeing that, well, I wouldn't necessarily be alone. There are women that do this. But certainly with faculty, yeah, we actually, there was a time where we had more female computer programming faculty than male faculty. Now it's gone kind of in the other direction. And that's just, of course, when we hire, we want the best teacher that we can get. But we definitely have been actively recruiting. And we do outreach and recruitment in high schools. Our division does the teach-in every November. Every faculty member does a teach-in somewhere. So we're very actively reaching out and trying to recruit. But again, lots of times by high school they've already pigeonholed themselves. Not always. There's always opportunities, but we do camps with students. We do day camps that are funded by Perkins, where we bring a high school class or a couple of classes to us, and then they work with the professors on a couple of little projects hands-on that day. We've done like mobile app development. We've done cyber security spying and things like that, and just stuff to get them excited about those careers. But that's of course boys and girls, but definitely very welcoming to the girls. Any ideas you have, though? Anything that we haven't thought of, we would love to hear about, because honestly, we are willing to do anything to raise the numbers, the percentage.
Could you tell us about the organization you're involved with, SWE?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell?
Yeah, we
more
actually
about
have
that?
4 student organizations in engineering. The engineering pre-major program here in Valencia is very unique and really cool. Most of those students are destined for a bachelor's degree in engineering, so a lot of them go to UCF, and then a handful of them go to other places, and a growing handful goes here. We have a 4-year Bachelor of Science in Engineering and Electrical and Computer Engineering Technology. So, which is a really great option for students. I mean, there's no downside, unless they want to pay to fish for a parking spot and and then be in a lecture hall with 200 people. I mean, some people might prefer that, but we're a really great choice. Anyway, sorry, that salesperson thing is always going with that. So the students have formed over the years 4 organizations, the oldest one being IEEE, which is the Institute for Electronics and Electrical Engineers. We have a huge student chapter here. We have the Florida Engineering Society, and that's a general engineering society. We have the National Society of Black Engineers, and of course all students are able to join that, but it's focused on the promotion of black engineers, not just at the higher education level and the education level in general, but also within industry. And then the newest one is the Society of Women Engineers, and this is an absolutely huge organization. It just took a while to get a leader here who wanted to do it, and again, that was Deb Hall. She got very excited about the prospect of doing that, and it's now, within less than a year, it's our largest student organization, and about a quarter of the members are male students, actually. But SWE nationally it's the largest engineering association internationally, and the annual conference, I've been to the last 2 years, just to give you an idea, there's usually 10,000 female engineers at that conference. It's sort of like anybody who's anybody or wants to be anybody or might be anybody is going to go to that. And they have a very active job fair there. They interview students and offer internships and jobs on the spot. So there's always about 400 guys that come to it, and they definitely are smart guys, because not only are they surrounded by all of these really smart women, if that would be of interest to them, which may or may not be the case, and that's fine, but they also have access to these employers who are actively seeking female engineers to become part of their staff. So it's very, very cool. We brought 7 students with us to the conference this year, and I think it was, I don't know if it was life-altering because they're already engineering majors, but it certainly got them really focused when they got back here as to what they needed to do to get the job they wanted, and that was really, really great to watch.
Anybody have any other questions? Okay.
All right.
Well, we thank you very much for joining us today, and we also thank you, Lisa,
Thank you.
for
This was
taking
fun.
time to talk about your path to leadership. And we hope that you all have learned something today that will help you in your path to leadership. And again, we thank you on behalf of the Association of Valencia Women for just taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely.
Please be sure to sign in, and we'll keep a list of everybody who was here and then contact you about future events too.
And feel free to take some food with you
Oh,
as you
yeah.
go. And if
Maybe
you,
like a
if you
stack of
didn't get
cheese.
a cup,
Stack
you're
of
welcome
cheese.
to
A lot
take
of
a cup
cheese.
on the back counter there.